Shabbat Shalom. We just read about all of that family messiness with Joseph being sold into Egypt by his brothers. And the messiness continues, the messiness of this family. So, I want to share with you that next chapter, the story of Judah and Tamar. Judah marries and has 3 sons: Onan, and Shelah. Judah gets a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was displeasing to the Lord, and the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Onan, "Join with your brother's wife and do your duty as a brother-in-law and provide offspring for your brother." This is the Levirate marriage. If the brother dies childless, the other brother provides a child in his name with his wife. But Onan, knowing that the seed would not count as his, let it go to waste whenever he joined with his brother's wife. So it was not to provide offspring for his brother. What he did was displeasing to the Lord, and God took his life also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Stay as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, he too might die like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. A long time afterward, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. So now Judah, the father of these 3, his wife dies. And when his period of mourning was over, Judah went up to Timnah, to his sheep shearers, together with his friend Hirach the Adulamite. And Tamar was told, who's now sitting in her father's house as a widow, she is committed to Shelah. She cannot marry anyone else. And she's just waiting. And she's waiting. And her life is entirely on hold. And she is told, "Your father-in-law is coming up to Timnah for the sheep shearing." So she took off her widow's clothes, covered her face with a veil, and wrapping herself up, sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown up, yet she had not been given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he took her for a prostitute, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, "Here, let me sleep with you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. He's a widow. It's like, what she asked, "Will you pay for sleeping with me?" He replied, "I will send a kid from my flock. I'll make payment. I'm good. I'll make payment." But she said, "You must leave a pledge until you have sent it. I need a guarantee." And he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" And she replied, "Your seal and cord and the staff which you carry." So what is the seal? The seal is something, it might have actually been cylindrical. It would roll across clay, leave a pattern. That's your signature. A cord also might have been that, like the the different pattern of knots and strings, and you can press it into the clay. Leave your seal, and that would be like a signature again. So leave your seal and cord and staff which you carry. In other words, leave your driver's license and credit card. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she conceived by him. Then she went on her way. She took off her veil and again put on her widow's garments. Judah sent the goat, the kid, by his friend the Adulamite, to redeem the pledge from the woman. but he could not find her. He inquired of the people of that town, where is the cult prostitute? In Hebrew, the first time they use the word zona, so she was a prostitute. Now, when he's looking for her, he says kadesha, which presumes that there was some religious practice in there, but he's probably just being tactful. Where is the cult prostitute? The one at Enayim, by the road. But they said, there has been no cult prostitute here. So he returned to Judah and said, I could not find her. Moreover, the townspeople said, there has been no prostitute here. Judah said, let her keep them, lest we become a laughingstock. I sent her the kid, but you could not find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot. In fact, she is with child by harlotry. Bring her out, said Judah, and let her be burned. As she was being brought out, she sent this message to her father-in-law. I am with child by the man to whom these belong. And she added, examine these. Whose seal and cord and staff are these? Judah recognized them and said, she is more in the right than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he was not intimate with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, one of them put out his hand, and the midwife tied a crimson thread on that hand to signify this one came out first. But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother. And she said, what a breach, Haratzta, you have made for yourself. So he was named Peretz. Afterwards, his brother came out, on whose hand was the crimson thread. He was named Zerah. Now, I said, messy family, and everything else that's been happening, that's gonna happen. Now, the messiness continues. Way in the future, what we read on Shavuot, the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth. You know, Ruth and Naomi, do you know that story? Naomi ends up widowed in Moab, and her 2 sons die, and so Naomi's going to go back to Bethlehem where she came from, and she says to her daughters-in-law, you go back to your father's house and remarry. And Orpah does, and Ruth says, no, I'm going with you. So Naomi and Ruth return to Bethlehem, and they really are in desperate straits. Tamar was in desperate straits. Ruth and Naomi are in desperate straits. Naomi tells Ruth to go and glean, and she ends up gleaning in a field owned by Boaz. And she comes back and tells Naomi, and Naomi says, Boaz is our kinsman. He is your redeeming kinsman. So Naomi tells Ruth, Boaz will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not disclose yourself to the man, to Boaz, until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down, and go over and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do. Ruth replied, I will do everything you tell me. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law Naomi had instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and in a cheerful mood went to lie down beside the grain pile. Then she went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back. There was a woman lying at his feet. It's again a society where men and women don't interact so closely. "Who are you?" he asked. And she replied, "I am your handmaid Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman." So, I mean, this is a desperate thing to do. It's scandalous. And actually, and they both, well, I don't know if Ruth knows it, but Boaz knows it. And he says, "But while it is true I am a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night, then in the morning, if he will act as a redeemer good, let him redeem. But if he does not want to act as a redeemer for you, I will do so myself." So she lay at his feet until dawn, but she rose before one could distinguish another, before light. For he thought, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." This shouldn't be known. So this is messy. But from all of this messiness, and this gets to the next point, for all of this messiness, eventually Boaz marries Ruth. They have a child, and Naomi, the mother-in-law, took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother, and the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son is born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, father of David. Who was David? King David. King David, who becomes the head of a royal line that defines history for the Jewish people in many ways. And then the book of Ruth ends. This is the line of Peretz. Peretz? Peretz. That's one of the kids born to Tamar and Judah. Messy, messy. This is the line of Peretz. Peretz begot Chetzron, Chetzron begot Ram, Ram begot Aminadab, Aminadab begot Nachshon, Nachshon begot Salmon, Salmon begot Boaz, Boaz begot Obed, Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. So this line of history, or in some traditions even this line of redemption, has a lot of messiness inside it. A lot of messiness. All of that irregularity that we read in this week's Parsha and at Shavuot also, all of this irregularity ends up being part of the redemptive story somehow. Life is messy, and yet we try to make it work out. Now, this past week, there was an online convening through Reconstructing Judaism on Israel and Zionism, about Reconstructionist movement and ideas about Israel and relationship with Israel. And a friend of mine and classmate, Rabbi Jonathan Kliegler, in his comments near the end of this convening, noted the problems associated with messianism today in Israel, which leads to extremism and violence. And he said, we embrace messiness over messianism. We embrace messiness over messianism. Life is messy, but that is what is real. Hanukkah has many meanings. My preferred meaning features the power of one small candle to dispel the darkness, the power of a small effort to make a large difference. Hanukkah comes when the days are shortest and night is darkest, because the moon is smallest. At the darkest times in life, we light candles so as to increase light. But Hanukkah can mean many other things. When I was a kid, I was confused about why the large piece of Hanukkah gelt had Theodor Herzl on it. Do you know Theodor Herzl? Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism. Why did you have Theodor Herzl on the Hanukkah Gelt? But for Zionists, the story of the Maccabees speaks of reclaiming sovereignty over the land. Sovereignty. So that story of Zionism is the story of Hanukkah. That is also why coins were given in Hanukkah. I don't know exactly when that started, but coins were given for Hanukkah because it represented sovereignty. And that was certainly before chocolate coins. We didn't always have chocolate, we the Jewish people. For American Jews, Hanukkah came to be about religious freedom. But think about how very American that is. That's an American meaning of Hanukkah. The dreidel is a European introduction, it seems, tied to the Hanukkah story by its own story, celebrating Torah study. Jews gather to study Torah. Torah study is the secret to our strength and longevity. But Torah study at times has been outlawed just for that reason. So when ruling authorities raid our houses of study, we pull out our dreidels and insist we are gathered in a gambling hall. The name of the festival, Hanukkah, means dedication. So it is most directly about the rededication of the temple and the restoration of some old order. The Maccabean revolt in history was an effort to throw off authorities who seem to have been trying to undermine Jewish life and commitment. In that sense, Hanukkah can be a celebration of all our efforts to resist disappearing into the pool of assimilation that Western society so much lends itself to. In that sense, again, Hanukkah is a festival that our people needs in these generations. But perhaps, initially, the festival of Hanukkah became a dynastic festival for the Hasmonean kings, in which case Hanukkah was a symbol of authority and authentication of power. Perhaps this is why, it seems, early rabbinic literature says hardly anything about Hanukkah. The oil story appears in writing only later in the Talmud. And the rabbis, at some point, introduce a Haftorah reading from Zechariah chapter 4, which includes the words, "Not by power, nor by might, but by my spirit, says the Lord." Messianism can lead and has led to violence and war. Messianism is about the overturning of the existing order. In fact, a total replacement of the existing order for something portrayed as more pure, more grand. But being there or getting there is not always associated with peace. Sometimes it is. Sometimes, indeed all too often, it is not. Because if someone is fully convinced that they have right on their side, they are not always cautious about their use of might. We are seeing that today all over the world in one way or another. Many people are longing for a new order, and there is openness to violence and authoritarianism in the name of a better world. I note also that the Christian festival that also happens this week actually emphasizes Messiah and Messianism. As we know, sometimes Christian implementation of that message includes talk of peace and goodwill towards all, and sometimes that implementation includes acts of war, coercion, and violence. It all depended on the interpretation and the moment. Messianism can be about peace or involve violence. In contrast, the rabbinic reading of Hanukkah does not emphasize Messiah or Messianism. No one is proclaimed a Messiah. The story of Hanukkah is, in fact, very messy. We need to emphasize peaceful paths to a better world, paths that emphasize light and dignity rather than might and authority. But letting 1,000 flowers bloom can be messy. Life is messy. Can we bring peaceful order to that chaos? order that grows out of the life each of those flowers is trying to grow into? The story of the oil, whether historical or not, communicates a message about the preferred direction of history. Let power flow from God gently into the world, somehow through the world as it is, not from human authorities through war and military might, seeking to remake the world in their own image. This is a dedication we can proclaim in our observance of Hanukkah in our day. Shabbat Shalom.